I'm Pietro Paganini, and welcome here. I see audience is joining, and for the first time we see Martin live. So I want to thank Martin and Victoria for the extraordinary job they have done for the past 2 months. And this is the 8th time that we meet with the Rome Free Market Roadshow. This is the Rome edition. We started back 2 months ago when with Barbara Colm, we were about to organize the Free Market Roadshow in Rome. And then we said, okay, what are we going to do if we can't meet because of the lockdown in Europe? And, Zoom was there, and we said, why don't we use this technology that is out there? And we started with the Free Market Roadshow digital edition. And then I know that many others started, and there was an amazing program. And we are supposed to end by end of May, but let's see, we might continue. Next week, we will have probably one of the last digital meetings. It's been an incredible experience. We've been focusing on many different topics in many different cities and areas of Europe. And in the Rome edition, this is the 8th time. And I'm very happy to introduce our guest of today. And let's say that we're taking an unusual topic, at least for many of us that are so strong believer of intellectual property, because today we're talking about free content and how the online and the internet are facilitating this new culture of the free content. And let me say that we're also, I shouldn't say that, but I'm very happy. And I learned a lot from all the guests we got in the past. Amazing people, really. I wish I could go on with this Zoom webinar Free Market Roadshow for the rest of my life, because I'm learning so much every time. Unfortunately, I'm not paid for this, dear Barbara. But today we really have a very fascinating, if not exciting, crowd, because they have incredible backgrounds. And we have Brian McWilliams, that he runs a podcast, but he's a stand-up, and my dream, if I could go back to my, zero age, I would become, a stand-up comedian, I have some.
Not recommended. It's a horrible life.
Yeah, you say, but this Stefano in New York, from Brooklyn, is one of my, being Italian is one of my, my best. And then we have Sidney Williams here that, has an amazing life. I was reading your bio that is available on the Free Market Roadshow biography. And you did basically everything, going through finance. And now that you retire, instead of going out with your dog and walking around with your dog, you're writing books and, making comments and, stimulating our lives. And then, as a Paganini, I'm not a violin player, but for the first time, I have the pleasure and honor to host a conductor, an orchestra conductor. That is Gabriella de Esteban from, I would say, from Spain, from Bilbao. May I say from Spain? Yes, from Spain.
Of course.
I could say from Spain without being shot in my head.
Momentarily, wait a little bit.
Yes, just because of the lockdown. So it's really an amazing crowd. And let me say also, we are live on YouTube and we are live on Facebook. And I know that, working this way, we get some people here, some people there, some people there. But the good thing is that we're gathering more and more people than usual. And the fact that we are on Facebook is giving us the chance to reach out to an amazing amount of people. And it's also being recorded. So it's available on Facebook, on YouTube recorded, and is also available recorded on the Free Market Roadshow. So what we're going to say today is going to be and stay there, at least till the internet is there, forever. But let me go. I like to start with Brian. So we start laughing a bit, I guess, Brian, correct? And what is the free content? And what a libertarian like you, who started very great, entrepreneurial activities, are you a supporter of free content? And why should a classical liberal be engaged with free content?
Well, so, my background, as you mentioned, I've done stand-up comedy quite a bit, and we've got our Lions of Liberty podcast, which is free. Obviously, it's rolling out free to everybody, but we see, especially now, I think a real proliferation of free content. And I, as a libertarian, do support free content wholeheartedly, and I am overall against the concept of intellectual property.
Wow.
So I knew I'm coming in, I'm like, oh, okay.
That's why we should laugh.
It's going to be 3-on-1 here. But I'll explain why. And really, for me, it comes down to a meritocracy in a lot of ways. You know, we in the free market believe in meritocracy. You have a good idea, that idea should be able to draw investment, it should be able to draw fans, it should be able to raise its own capital based upon its merits. When you have free content, you are literally throwing it out and saying, this is my best. You're putting it in competition with everything that's out there, and you can really make a name for yourself. The second thing I want to mention about IP and why I'm overall against it is that, to me, IP represents, in a large part, a regulatory body wherein you look at competition, and we overall as free market supporters would be against regulation. When we say that obviously regulation supports the largest entities most often, those are the people that are able to abide by it. Those are the people that are able to enforce it. And when we have free content coming out versus say paid content, you have the bigger players at an advantage trying to go after smaller people that might have a similar product. In stand-up comedy, there's a lot of things called joke theft. And you see this with the meme environment as well. It's hard to prove that somebody stole your joke. They might be similar concepts. But if you do have a large arm and a large entity behind it, they can come after you, have the legal power and monetary power to make your life miserable when it simply might be a coincidence. And the third thing tying into that I'll throw out there, and then I'll shut my mouth, is that when you have IP and you have versus free content, with free content, you're eliminating the gatekeepers. And I think you find that you'll have far more free exchange of ideas and far more content when you're not forced to go through a larger entity like a publishing arm. In the case of music, we were mentioning YouPorn, very popular these days, people putting their content out there without having to go through a publisher or an entity that has to, that has to bring you in and vet you and go through all these different mechanisms to get that content out to the public. You're able to build your own brand and get that content out. And again, based upon its own merits and without having to go through and give somebody a cut of your revenue or go through a slowdown to reach the consumer directly.
Great, this is amazing. And just one note that I see some people on here that are following us on Zoom, and there's many on Facebook. Just a reminder, on Facebook, I can't get your feeds and comments. So if you want to make comment, ask question, please come on Zoom. Talking about free content, Zoom is free, so be happy to join us. Very interesting. I'm not sure that many people in the libertarian or the free market, particularly in Europe, are really sloughing right now. They might be, terrified because you mentioned it. IP, I'm not sure it makes them laugh. It probably make them, and I'll come to Gabriella in a second, but I want to go to Sydney because of what you said. Sydney, do you agree? Kind of, it goes back to Marx saying property, is it theft? Is Sydney there?
Right.
Yeah, you see, Sydney is it always IP and he froze.
At the second, he was there nodding along, and then at the second you go to him.
Hey, Sydney, where are you? He froze. He just jumped out of the conversation. Then I have to come, as promised, to Gabriella. Gabriella, you're a conductor. You produce music. I read your bio, and it's again available on our website, and it's impressive. And in a way, I'm very shy to talk to you, so I'm not sure how I should address you. As a Paganini, I can't address you as I want. Do you agree with this? IP? Are you happy of putting your music online and it's being taken by somebody else? Tell me no. Tell me no.
It's how can I explain you that? My world is completely different, perhaps because comes from centuries ago. Our evolution is going till today very smoothly, adapting to the society, adapting to the innovation in technology. I said smoothly till the COVID-19 that it's a big break in our profession. Then has really because of this long and very thick and very deep history, has a different approach about what you are explaining about the contents and free or not free. Let me be much more clear. We started not so far, as far away in the time with the record 75, after it was the magnets, after it was the cassette, after it was the CDs, the MP3, 4, 5, etc. And suddenly we are in internet. And I think, how to explain that? I think it's going a little bit too quick, the technology, for us to know what are the real rights, what are the free contents, etc, etc, etc. I mean, we have to deal with a lot of things when Brian is telling about, I'm creating that and I'm giving it to other people. The problem is that it's one person, or can be a group of 3, 5, let's say a reduced group. We in music, and if I speak in general in art, that is much, much more bigger, we are speaking about an incredibly amount of people who lives in different countries, who approach music in different ways and thinkings, depending of the culture they are coming from, and who are not only in one thing, because you are saying music, but the music, you can start in the subdivision of music, which can be lyric, which can be classical, which can be Baroque, Renaissance, or can be contemporary music. Each of these subdivisions has his own problems to give it clear or to give it to the public. Then giving free this content, how can you give free a fifth of Beethoven when there is so many versions? I mean, it's there, you can take it.
Yeah.
You can approach that perhaps with contemporary music, contemporary sculpture, painter, etc, etc.
No, that's a great point, and I'm sure many of the people that are following us, 2 weeks ago we had a very, I would say, outstanding debate on IP, intellectual property, a few days prior the International Intellectual Property Day. But Brian, I come back to you because Sydney has really disappeared. So probably he wanted to be paid, and he realized we were not going to pay him, so he's just gone.
Well, he's not a musician.
He's a businessman. It's a finance man. You go, my time is over and I'm gone. But
that's the big difference.
Brian, this is a crucial point, because you said, I can do, you have this brilliant podcast that is called the Lions of Liberty podcast. And I invite everybody that's following us, particularly on Facebook, to go and listen to it. But that's a podcast. And probably Gabriella is right. A podcast is something that you freely do. You open your computer, you put it there, you start, talking, giving your thoughts. And you might take some of, the brilliant jokes that you have around by other stand-up comedians and, make your show. True, but what Gabriella says is, here we have music that comes from century back, and we have an orchestra. Orchestra is, how many, 30 people, 50 people?
95.
Yeah, it's like a football team. It's like a big football team.
But please don't make the big Mahler symphonies, because then you are in hundreds.
Yeah, so it's like a big football team, okay? And it costs. How would you allow that content to go out there for free?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, I mean, there's no rule saying that you have to put it out there for free. Of course, you can charge whatever you want for it. I mean, I think that when we're talking about intellectual property, though, bringing that to bear, obviously what the question would be is, if you put that content out there and it's intended to be paid and somebody takes it, what then? And that is always going to be a problem, or if you're looking to recoup your costs. Now, I would argue that if you bring all these people together, they have basically signed on knowing, if we're in an intellectual property voidless world, when these people come together, they're going to sign on, and you're investing in that. And they're all in the understanding that, look, we're taking a risk. And this is any business venture. You're taking a risk no matter what the product might be. In this case, it's music. When you put it out there, you have to trust that people are looking at it as something that has value, and with value, intrinsically, will have somebody willing to pay a certain amount of money for that. And I think this is where, too, it comes around to brand building and making that proposition wherein people now, when there's issuing free content, they're looking to build customer loyalty in the way that they're willing to engage with you and pay more for your services. And maybe that's for something where you encourage them via the free content to then get on a subscription model. And if they then take that subscription model and they republish it, then and say, well, and let's say they say it's their own, well, then that goes into the area I would say is fraud. So you do have a fallback where you can go after them in a legal sense and say, look, you are pretending this is something that you created on your own. That obviously is not true, and go after them and try to recoup the cost of that. But in an overall sense, I do think you have to say, if it's good, people will pay for it. And, you know, regardless, you can charge whatever you want from the get-go, and then hope that people appreciate the value you've assigned to it.
But isn't that...
Brian, excuse me, Brian, you say, yeah, would be good that the people is pay for it. Brian, how do you expect then the musicians live? Because they need to pay electricity and rent every month. And second, socially, today, open the window and look at the people outside. You don't think these young generations, oh my God, I'm speaking like an old woman, are so used to have everything for free?
Well, I do think that this generation is more...
How can you make them pay?
Well, that's the thing, is even with a business model wherein you are charging, you do have IP, you're still not making anybody pay. It's still voluntary interaction. And so regardless, you're going to have people get paid if they're going to create either they come in together and they say, we're going to do this based upon a belief that we're going to get paid down the line. And you see a model is pretty prevalent right now in content creation. People come together based upon the premise that they'll get paid down the line and then recoup those costs later on. But in regards to the generation currently, I do agree with you. They are very much used to, and I'm younger, but not of that generation. They are used to ample amounts of free content. And what they do is, and you're seeing this play out, I mean, look at YouTube and the number of people on YouTube that have become massive successes based upon Patreon, based upon direct donations, based on people buying their albums direct via YouTube and via websites. You do have people opting to say, this is what I choose to spend my money on. So I don't think it's something where you just say, well, because there's so much free content out there that no one's going to pay for anything, because the fact remains that the best content still gets paid for. And what happens a lot of the time in the model we have existing now is that the free content is an entryway. You know, you put out a certain amount of free content and then you say, now I have a paywall behind it if you want to get more or you want to keep going. So it's more of an enticement to open that door into a pay model.
In a way, so Brian, let me understand if, because now you clarify. At the beginning, I thought, isn't that a bit too much utopian? That
you... Oh no, I don't believe in giving everything away. I'm a libertarian. I believe in getting paid.
Okay, now we come.
I was
very happy. I have to tell you, Gabrielle and Brian, and I'm sorry that Sydney has really disappeared. So I think he wanted really to be paid, and he said, what I'm gonna say is gonna be paid. And so he understood that Brian, Gabrielle, and myself wanted it for free. So he disappeared. But now, besides joking, at the beginning I thought about that. Now you clarify, but let me say this: it's probably the first time that we're really having something on which we hardly disagree. And that's wonderful, at least, and you provoke a Spanish strong woman. So I would start running if I were.
I'm extremely sweet, Brian. I tell you, I'm extremely sweet. But may I ask you something?
Yeah, go ahead, Gabriella.
We come from different worlds. You know, you are the modern, let's say, and I am the classic, even if I'm specialized in contemporary, but let's say classical. You are saying, I have a good idea, I made a podcast, I throw it there, it's for free, everything. Okay, then me, a very, very simple person. Everybody has an idea today, I see. Everybody is throwing into the internet plenty of things for free. What I see is that there is a quantity that is immense, and equality that is a garbage, 95% of that. How you deal with that?
Podcast among it.
No.
No, yeah.
So I'm so sorry, but never I listen about you before they call me. I'm so sorry.
No.
You see, I am from the prehistorical time, but really I like to be in the internet, and the garbage there is there.
Yeah, there is quite a bit.
Brian, isn't that this garbage that Gabriella is talking about in a way is a ground for getting good ideas? If you don't have the garbage, you don't have good ideas because you need, a multitude of people to go on.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. And I guess maybe you could look at the garbage in the internet as the compost heap for which we can use to fertilize good ideas. Because there is definitely a large quantity of garbage out there. I mean, I'll use podcasting as an example. The average podcast lasts 7 episodes and gets no following, yet it's still out there, it exists. And to your point, it can be a little bit overwhelming, it can be very clogging. But this is where I harken back to my original statement talking about gatekeeping and immediate access to consumers, is that you have to have faith in the marketplace of ideas wherein people will be able to find that. And because of the democratization of content, people will hopefully gravitate towards the best ideas, promote them and support them. Wherein previously, before we had the free content model, you had essentially the big, let's use music again, the big gatekeeping publishing entities. You had Universal Music Group, you had, whatever, that's the only one I can think of, Sony Publishing. They would be the ones who decide literally what you listen to and what you don't. They had pay-for-play models with radio stations wherein you would literally be dictated what to follow or what not to follow. And now it might be more difficult to filter through the content out there to find what you love. But at the same time, you might find something that you would have never experienced before. And you can choose to support that, directly, rather than going through a secondary model where you're buying a CD from a store. You can support an artist.
Let me ask you this, then I'm coming back to Gabriella, and then finally going back to Sidney. Sidney, we thought you disappeared because you wanted to be paid and you understood it.
No, I disappeared because I lost my network connection.
And that's the U.S. We should tell President Trump that even in the U.S., or AT&T is not as good as they promised. But
that it was the virus. COVID.
Yeah, that's the COVID. The
virus has gone digital.
The Chinese internet COVID. But Brian, I see your point, but I might say Gabriella in a way is arguing, but in terms of classical music, that's something the young generation, for instance, might not be educated to. If you put it there and it's shared for free, that will disappear. So either you get government supporting it, as it happens in many institutions in Europe, in Italy, in Spain, I guess in the United States as well, or you need private donation, but you need kind of enlightened people to do so. How would you justify free content for instance, old music?
Well, I do think it's kind of funny that we're talking about intellectual property in classical music when, of course, there is no intellectual property over classical music because it's now for free for everybody to do what they want with it.
It's for free till after 75 years after the death of the composer.
I'm just pointing out that Beethoven's family isn't recouping any of that money.
No, but you have the problem. Whenever I wanted to put some composers in a program, and I don't have a big budget, my first question is, will he die, please? Will he die? 40 years ago.
Damn. You gotta falsify some birth certificates.
Yeah, go ahead, and then we move to Sidney.
Yes, I'll keep this brief. Well, to your point, I mean, I think you answered your own question there, Pietro, and that you would have private donors. There's people, and this is also, it comes down to a little bit of marketing and finding who your niche audience is, but there are people that will definitely support classical forms of art. I mean, I went for the first time this year, I actually went to the ballet. I saw the Nutcracker with my wife. I know, first time, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And I never thought I would have loved ballet, but still, this is a classical art form. I'm a modern man. And yeah, the Nutcracker Suite. I thought it was fantastic, and I will now happily support and attend the ballet often. Just as I do enjoy classical music, I've gone and attended symphony, performances before. And I think that even though there's younger generations, you still have people that are growing up as classical musicians. You still have parents that are very big fans of classical. So I don't think that's going to go to the wayside just because it happens to come out in a free model without government support. You're going to have private people and private organizations that are always going to be willing to support that. It's just a question of the scale.
Brian, just a question before Pietro go to Sydney. You think the feeling, the emotion, the sentiment you had watching this nutcracker on the scene, preparing yourself at home, going to the theater, feeling this ambience, listening to the noises after the silence, and it starts this music and these beauties. You think that would be possible through a screen?
No, and but
I just let that.
what?
Sydney, help me, man.
Okay, and would I have attended that live performance had I not had access to the free content, the songs, and the Nutcracker Suite being used, and the songs being used so often to catch my ear and to make me say, you know what, I'd love to see that live.
Then we go to another really big problem we have is because the music catch my ear.
Gabri, let me interrupt you. I need to go to Sydney because he has been struggling with his internet here, and I'm afraid to lose him again. But Sydney, help me, because here I have a stand-up comedian that is promoting and defending, I would say, the free content online with very strong and valid arguments, who I have to say, and Brian, allow me to say that, he has a very American approach, that there is that philanthropic idea that, unfortunately, in this case, in the way I understand Gabriella's concern, in Europe, people would say, well, a government can do it. They need money. They can go to the government because I go to the government too. What is your position on free content? And I know you missed most of the conversation, so I'm sorry, but I have to say, it was very intense. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I guess I've sort of mixed feelings about it because I think if an artist creates something, it really belongs to that artist. You know, whether that's a painting, whether that's a book, whether that's a piece of music. I mean, it seems to me that it belongs to the person. It doesn't belong to the state, and it doesn't belong to the collective country as a whole. And to get paid for it, the international property rights become pretty important, and the right to own property is embedded in our Constitution. So it seems to me that is a piece of property as much as your house or your farm or a cow that you own. It's something that you've created, and it's something that is your own. I wanted to step back, if I could, though, just for a moment. Now that I'm back on, and before.
Yeah, you were stealing the Wi-Fi from your neighbor there.
Yeah. Before Ned Lamont knocks me off again, our blue governor. But to me, this is all part of sort of disruption, and disruption is a natural part of life. I mean, we get disrupted when our children, when we first go to school. We get disrupted when we fall in love. We get disrupted if we lose our job. Disruption is a constant in our lives. And it's the thing that Joseph Schumpeter, the Austrian economist, talked about the whole idea of creative destruction. And we see it in technologies all the time. And we've seen it in transportation, we've seen it in medicine, we've seen it in art. New technologies come along and they replace the old ones. And art and everything else has to sort of adjust to the new changes. So that, I mean, we have, for example, in technologies like PayPal allow us to pay for things that we can get online. We can stream movies through Netflix. We can through simulcast, we can stream, we can watch operas live. There are a lot of things in which the way that technology and creativity sort of move together. And what's important, I think, is to avoid government getting in the way. In other words, you let the artist and you let the technologist and you let the consumer sort of work together to find out what is going to be the best answer. I mean, this is a little bit off the subject of art, but for example, Uber was a perfect example, in my opinion, because in New York City, for example, there were about 15,000 yellow cabs that all had medallions, and the medallions had to be purchased. When Uber came along, the number of Uber cabs jumped to 60,000 within a year or two, which showed you that the demand was really closer to 60 to 70,000 cars. The government had regulated it to keep it at 15,000, so it was artificially low. It created enormous disruptions in terms of economies, and most of the cabs in New York were owned by very wealthy individuals who owned a bunch of medallions and then leased them out to people to whom they paid very little. But there were some individuals, smaller individuals, who got hurt when the price of medallions came down. But that wasn't the fault of Uber. The fault was really the government for the regulations that government had been imposed. And I think we always have to keep these things in mind when we're talking about whether it's art or not. I mean, if I write something and I send it out, I get paid for it if somebody deems it to be of value. If they don't deem it of value, then I don't get paid for it. I mean, that's the way markets tend to work. I think if we look at the advantages of what's been going on in some of these changes, is that the advantages basically is that new technologies have allowed creative people to be more creative than they've ever been in the past, because you can do whatever you really want, whether it's writing, whether it's making jokes, or whether it's writing music, or whatever you want to do. There's a platform that's available to get it out. It's also been much greater for consumers, because consumers can do whatever they want. I mean, they can look at this, they can look at that, they can go all over the place.
You certainly agree, because what Brian said that to me is very important is that the internet, but in general, let's say the ICT, digital, big revolution or disruption is a better word,
right,
has changed that relationship between the content creator and the big audience, like killing intermediaries, and gave opportunity to Brian to play his own shows online without going through a mafia of agents and Hollywood style situation. He helped a lot of kids around being creative, sometimes even junk. I see people with millions of followers that they produce junk on TikTok, or what I think is junk on TikTok, and they are there because there is no intermediary. It gave the chance, if you think, to Steve Jobs in a way to kind of kill the monopoly of the traditional record industry, because he said, I can give you one song instead of a full CD for $0.99, for instance. So he has changed. But then there is perhaps an extreme where there are situations that you correctly said, probably you need some government intervention. And I agree with you on the Uber case. But guys, if you look at Uber in the US, there is a story. If you look at Uber in Europe, I would say there are many different stories. Even in the UK, that is the closest country probably to the US, there's a lot of problems with regulation where, regulator came in, stopped Uber. In Italy, you don't find, Uber Pop. You only find the limo at a very expensive cost. It depends very much on the culture. So Brian, would you see your model working everywhere, or you need some time of regulation also to educate people? Because what you said earlier, and I have some people here I can see in the audience, and I got a message, now on the internet, people they are on Zoom, they send messaging on WhatsApp, whatever. Anyway, one of the questions that I got is about philanthropy. And I agree with that. It seems not really linked to free content, but in the US, you have an important culture of philanthropy. Like you said, you went to the ballet, you loved it, probably because your wife wanted you to love it, but you then decided.
I loved it on my own merits, I promise you.
That's why you're still married. But
everyone was very fit. I enjoyed that.
You wanted to donate. You said, I love this. It's great. you know, when I was in California, I was used to listen to NPR, the National Public Radio, and I was amazed by all these jingle about donations. That I started donating money too, even to the NPR. You know, all my friends said that's a communist radio, but they said, well, they do good things, and I wanted in a way to support that. But when you come to Europe, I'm not sure about Asia, but when you come to Europe, this culture of philanthropy is not very much here, because we have a tradition of, you know, government interfering and saying, oh, I need this, there's the government. What would you say?
Well, I would say that I completely agree that culture comes first. And this is something that I think even in the broader libertarian sense of where I come from, a lot of libertarian concepts and ideas would simply not be possible without a culture that is accepting to those ideas and has had those out in public, out for discourse. This is why, you know, what you're doing with the Free Market Roadshow is so important, with the Austrian Centers. These are very important things to forward the concepts of liberty and the culture to be more accepting and less reliant, I would say, on government. I mean, obviously, any populace is voting on what they want, or they have the ability to revolt should they not like where their money is being spent, at least in theory. So if they're complicit with going along and supporting the arts, and they feel that this is an important thing for the government to do, if they're willing to voluntarily, hopefully, sacrifice tax monies to that, then that's their prerogative. But as far as a culture of philanthropy, yeah, you do need to try to foster that. And I think that is something that you could see happen more and more. And hopefully organizations, you know, like with Gabriella, the organization that you're working with, and the conducting work you're doing, hopefully that you can introduce a philanthropic model on top of that. Maybe initially it's a bonus. You know, we're going to perform special shows if you fund us in addition to what the government's doing, and then slowly wean people off of that government model. I'll give you a quick real world example, because I also do public relations as a career, and I have a client that is named CASA, which is a foster children's advocacy organization. They were state funded. During the 2008 crash, they lost their state funding and had to rely purely on community funding, and they were able, with my help, to bring in community awareness and to raise funds for that. And now they're doing better than ever. They have a higher budget than they ever had, and they're helping 3 times more children, maybe because they need to show a little bit more efficacy as to where that money is going to the people that are supporting them. So I would say that the culture has to shift, but I don't think it's an impossibility in Europe or anywhere else to have that happen.
Gabriella, do you see this possible in Europe? And, you know, we're talking generally Europe, but...
Sincerely?
Yeah,
no.
Of course. Don't lie to us.
Tell us what you...
Let's say, if I would be a politician, I could really, in the next 14 minutes, make a plate how people in Europe are really consistent with the idea of culture, because we are the most older and culturally country in the world. If you get out in the street, you see that today they will give money only for football or soccer, I don't know what you have there, and for TV program. In general, very vulgar and very garbage TV, but for culture, no. And I mean, the first answer, it will be, I pay enough taxes to the government. Do I need also to really pay for culture? They need to take me for the high amount of taxes I'm paying. No, it's not really, and I don't think in the next years it will happen.
So basically, you are saying, and we still have 5 minutes to go, but you're saying we are obliged for the future to come to have government involved in many art, cultural activities. Basically, that's...
Sadly, yes. I say sadly because then politics are involved, and depending of which party you are, then you get more or nothing at all money for your project.
I think most people in the Free Market Roadshow community will never invite you anymore. No, I'm joking. It's great. I'm coming to you, Brian. Let me pose to all of you, and starting from Sydney here, there's a question for GCREM. I'm not sure what GCREM stands for, but every entrepreneur needs incentives of any kind to innovate and create full stop. A singer is like an entrepreneur. So why should he create content if he has no return? The culture of free content could only be an emanation of socialist culture. Oh, Brian, that's
An emanation of socialist culture. I would disagree wholeheartedly.
Let's start with Sidney. Sidney.
Yes. Yeah. No. Anybody who create. I mean, I think there are different reasons for creating things. I mean, there's the need that the artist has in order to create something, which I think is separate. In the end, he has to get paid, and because otherwise he cannot live unless he's independently wealthy. But I wanted to go back to one thing that Brian was saying, and that is about the endowments or using some form of a tax-exempt form to help pay for some of these cultural events. You got to keep in mind that they are all partnerships with the government. People donate money for these things because they get the tax deduction. Now, the real question would be is how much would they donate if there was no tax deduction? And nobody knows the answer to that. But I mean, I make donations to various cultural events, you know, and as most people do. And the United States is probably, I think, is the most generous country in the world in that respect. But it is a partnership with government. You cannot deny that. And you've got to keep that in mind when you're talking about that. But I'm sorry, that's not the question that you were asking about.
But yeah, no, in that case, I'm going to Brian. So we have a few minutes to go here, but I'd love to go longer, but we put this rule of 45 minutes because otherwise there is a premium abonnement that you guys have to pay for staying longer. You've been accused, you're a stand-up comedian, so you have to take this. You've been accused to be a socialist.
I don't know
That's
how.
not a joke, huh? That was a question.
I'm flabbergasted. It's not a socialist model because at the end of the day, socialism is not about recouping and making money and profit, which is what I'm all about, which is what anybody putting this content out, I would think would be about. I don't believe in a socialist utopia. I don't believe in all people giving things out for free for the concept of let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. This is, it's a means to an ends. And as I said, this is an entryway. The idea is that you build a brand through your content, and then you're able to monetize that content either through live performances, through a Patreon model where people are paying you for additional content on the back end, or by virtue of being hired on to do other jobs or to speak at events like this one. And I'll wrap that because I think we have 15 seconds left. Somebody else go.
No, man. I enjoy listening to all of you. So Gabriella, do you hear?
Pietro, can I just make one last comment? And that is that you got to remember there are also artists out there who are never going to survive, because I agree with Brian that if you make something and it works and it sells, that's great. But if you make something and it doesn't work and it doesn't sell, then you fail, and that's also part of capitalism, and that's part of the system under which we live.
Yeah.
Gabriella, before coming to you, I have another question here. Luckily not on my WhatsApp, but it's from Stefano, and he wrote an essay, but I'll try to read it quickly. Provocative. I think that intellectual property is incredibly important in protecting hard work and commitment to a cause, but somehow some of the greatest invention came after some breach in copyright laws, helping those who cannot afford to study or to buy knowledge to be really equal in the chance of inventing and innovating. What should be taken into account to solve this debate? Will the strengthening of individual property be a problem for human innovation? It was too long. It was very articulated.
Who knows? I mean, time is evolving too quick, and I think artists, everybody, but artists needs to adapt. The problem, as Sidney said before, if you are not good enough or your content is really not good enough, you are not being paid. You are not being paid, then you cannot be an artist anymore because you need to live.
Yeah, and there is another comment, sorry, coming first. Again, she cramped, so probably was not happy with you, Brian. And removing IP rights and monetary incentives for content creators may have two results. One, poor innovation and creativity, and two, state replacing privates. What do you think?
I
Kind of reiterate the question. It kind of turns the question around.
I think that the incentive is doubly there for people to go out with content creation. I said, you're removing the gatekeepers, you're making people enabled to create revenue immediately. And in fact, we've seen an explosion in the amount of content and the creativity of content. We're in an era right now where you have more creativity, more options. Look at the explosion of television, of online programming, of podcasting. You have more creativity pouring out over the internet right now than you ever have in human history. So I would argue that the free content model, if anything, has encouraged that. And I'm not sure about state replacing private in regards to free content. If anything, I want the state to be completely removed. And I would argue that IP brings the state in, as Citi mentioned, quite strongly, and that by including IP and making sure that you have to protect all of these different regulations and protect yourself against people coming after you, should you have a similar idea.
Let me ask you this, because it's very exciting, but I have time constraints, but I want to make this question. You said you can go out there with free content, but at a certain point you can be paid for what you do. So correct. In a way, if you get paid for what you do, that is going to be protected, or you just rely on consumers or users to be responsible enough to not take it for free.
Yeah, well, and again, if they take that content and they put it out there as their own, then I think you can still go after them as far as a form of fraud and go after them legally. But yeah, you put something out there and you are relying on people to choose to fund you in one way or the other. And I think regardless, criminals still exist that take content and put it out there as their own, even if you have IP. So that you're not ever going to stop it, but by opening up and democratizing that content, you give far more people far more opportunity and far more choice to support the artists that they love and for people to make money.
Great. Sidney, anything you want to add? I need to give you some time because you disappear for a while. And then
I think that I'm fine, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Gabriella, you want to reply to Brian?
Better not.
Okay, no, great, guys. It's been an amazing discussion. I want to thank our audience here on Zoom, the many one on Facebook and YouTube. This has been a recorded event. It will be online forever for free, actually, because we have some donation. But let's Let me make this promise. Gabriella, you're going to send us some tickets, free tickets for your next concert, wherever it's going to be. And you can physically come there because we really need to come to a concert. Brian, share with us your, I see your internet, Twitter account, Lions of Liberty Podcast. So everybody should follow and make some donation, of course. And then CMA is a publisher publishing great books. We're going to buy your books and make you rich, extremely rich. Okay. Thank you, Gabriella, for being with us from Spain. Thank you, Brian. There was some message here from, who's that? From who's that? Brit, I guess. Thank you, Gabriella. Right? So thank you very much again to my organization, Competere. Thank you again from Vienna for the Austrian Economic and Center. And thanks for everybody to follow us. I hope we will be able to continue this discussion, and I'm launching a proposal to Barbara. Next time we can physically meet with a Free Market Roadshow to have this kind of discussion with these three great folks. Ryan was supposed to make us laugh. Instead, he made us think. The same with Gabriella and the same with William. It was a pleasure for me to be here with you and learn so much, and hopefully we have contributed to enhance knowledge and the public debate. Thank you very much to everybody.